Okay, let's continue talking about variables. I'm going to program some of the stuff I talked about in the last video to see how it actually looks in processing. So I opened processing already, and I'm going to declare a variable x, and I'm going to initialize it to 10. So in comments, I'm going to write declaring variable x and initializing it. So if I want to see what's inside of x, I would actually print it. So there's this function print ln, and I'm going to basically print what's inside of x. So if I press run now, the value of x is going to show in the console. So if you look at the console area, which is down here, at 10 shows. So let's declare another variable. I'm going to do int y, and this time I'm going to declare it. So declare variable y, and I'm not initializing it. So as I said, if you don't initialize a variable, it's going to contain a random value, which we call garbage, because it's going to contain whatever happens to be left over in memory at that point of time. So what happens if I try to print the content of variable y, which is garbage and random? What do you think happens? Let's try it out. So we actually get an error. So this on this brownish line, you see a message saying that the local variable y may not have been initialized. So processing actually takes that as an error. It refuses to print out the content of y. It says that there is not a legitimate content in y, so it doesn't print it. So if I go up here and I assign a value, so let's say I assign a value 20. So here, this is called an assignment. I am actually putting a value inside my variable y. So I am assigning value 20 to y. Now, if I run it, everything should be fine. So I'm going to get values 10 and 20 on the screen. Okay, well, that's basically how you would declare, initialize, or assign a value to a variable, and using the print or println statements, you're going to be able to print them out. Here's a quick difference between println and print. So if I don't have the ln here, this is what happens. If I try to run this, I get 10 and 20 side by side. So println prints it and goes right to the next line. So if you have println, you kind of see that you're going to print 10 and then you go to the next line. You see, every time I run processing, the little window pops up because it's waiting for us to plot something on it. We're not drawing anything. We're still just looking at what's happening in the console. And these print statements are a great tool if you want to see what's inside of your variables and basically debug your program, as we'll talk about it in a little bit. Okay, we're still talking about variables, and one thing that is really important is naming your variables. So far in this program, I have named my variables x and y. They are really not meaningful names. So it's as a guideline, you're supposed to have meaningful names for your variables. So if you're writing a program about let's say finding the area of a rectangle, you shouldn't call your variables a and b. You should call them width and length. There are some rules in how you can name your variables though. So let me go to my slides here. So an identifier, or the name of a variable, these are just rules you basically have to memorize, but it's pretty logical. It needs to be a string of letters from A to Z lowercase or from A to Z uppercase. You can also have underscore, and numbers from 0 to 9. But it can only start by a letter from A to Z or an underscore. So you cannot start a variable with a number. An identifier must be either one word or two words connected to each other by an underscore. And identifier have no semantics, so they don't have any meanings. So you can call it A, B, C, D. You can have any variable names, but as I said, it's much better if you have meaningful names that are self-explanatory, and of course avoid offensive words because you never know who's going to read your program. An identifier cannot have any of these symbols. So you can't have a variable name containing the hash sign or the equal sign or things like that. Also, identifiers are case sensitive. So if you have Apple with an uppercase and if you have a lowercase, then that's the different variable. So it's not going to work. Another thing, reserved words. So words like double, int, final, or keywords in the language. You can't use keywords in the language. These are called keywords. You cannot use them as variable names. So actually, before I start talking about final, going back to my processing window. So many windows open. Going back to my processing window, if here I go ahead and I say C equals 40, what happens? Let's try to do this. So I get an error. It says cannot find anything named C. Why is that? That is because C has not been declared yet. So if you want to use a variable, you must first declare it. So you must first go ahead and say up here or even here, I would declare it and then use it. So let's say just like right before it, if I said in C, then I try to run this program, it works now. There's no error and it works because I need to declare it. So you need to declare a variable before using it. You cannot use a variable without declaring it. Now let's go down here. So I'm still in the same program and I'm going to say int x. What happens now? I already have an x up here and I say int x again. What happens? Try to run it. I get another error. It says duplicate local variable x. So you cannot declare, you cannot name x x. You cannot duplicate the names because the computer gets confused. You can use x after declaring it, but you cannot declare another variable named x. And I can, however, have a variable capital X. That's perfectly fine because capital X and lowercase x, the computer actually perceives them as being different names. It's a terrible idea to have a program where you have variable names that similar, but certainly it could be done because the computer looks at them as being different. All right, I'm going to have another video at least on variables and perhaps another tutorial video for you. Thank you.